Okay guys, so like I said in class, today's homework is going to be fairly easy. I'm not quite sure if it'll be super quick because I do have quite a few books to talk about, but it will be easy on your part because I'm not asking for you to take any notes. So at the end of tonight's video, you should be able to have a list of at least 3 of the novels that we talk about as potential books you want to read at the end of this year. So, the only thing you have to do is take notes on the books we're about to talk about if you want to, or in the very, very small amount, the very least, 3 novels that sound the best to you. So remember, you can't read a book you've already read. So I know I've had a couple of people say that they read the book Hoot, for example, in their 5th grade class, or I've had a couple of people that have read the book Speak by LAURIE HALSE Anderson on their own times. They found it in the library and thought it looked good. So please don't pick a book that you've already read. To get an A, you have to read more than one book, so it would be a good idea to write down, your top 3 choices and maybe then some after that, just in case you don't get your top choice the first go round. You can read whatever book you want really for the second book once you finish the first. And don't just pick something that your friend is reading or is interested in. Pick something that you're interested in, because the only way you're going to be engaged and drawn into a book is if it's something that sounds good to you. And while your friends are your friends because you have things in common, they might not necessarily have the same ideas about what book sounds the most interesting. So please don't fall to peer pressure and instead pick the book that sounds the best to you. All right, we're going to get started. So the first choice that I have for you is Speak by LAURIE HALSE Anderson. And basically, this is just, for each book, I'm going to have just a quick little exclaimer here on what it's really about. But I love this book. It's one of my favorite in this whole selection. I like the way that the author writes. It's dark comedy, I guess, if you will. So the main character's name is Melinda, and the summer before her freshman year, she goes to a party with her friends and something bad happens to her. I'm not going to tell you, and if you've read this book already, don't tell anybody else what it is, but the party gets busted. She's the one that calls the cops, so everybody knows that she's the one that calls the cops, and now they don't want to talk to her. So she starts freshman year of high school with no friends, and it's really about learning how to speak up for yourself and talk about what happened at that party. It's a really powerful novel. You've got a really powerful heroine in the end. So this is going to be really good for our proficiency talking about character analysis, because you definitely see a real change in the character through the course of her freshman year, and then at the end when she learns to speak up for herself, there's a dramatic change there too. All right, that's the first book. The next book that we have to choose from is Stargirl. Again, if you've read this book already, then choose a different one. This one's interesting because it's actually told from a boy's perspective or point of view, even though it's about a girl in the high school. But basically, Stargirl is new at the school, and she's just so radically different that at first the student body can't decide if she's different in a good way or different in a bad way. And at first they decide she's different in a good way, and they just really embrace her and her differentness. And the main character that the narrator of the story falls in love with her, and eventually the school turns on her, and the main character Leo kind of tries to urge her to become more normal, the thing that could destroy her. And so it's really about this idea of being an outcast, being different, and kind of bending to what those around you want you to be instead of being your true self. So this is again another really good one for us to look at character development. So that's Stargirl. Okay, Revenge of the Wannabes. This is actually a part of the Click series. It's the 3rd novel in the series. It's a little bit longer. This is probably geared more towards the girls in the class, especially if you really enjoy fashion and makeup and some high brand retailers. So they drop a lot of names in here, so if you start reading it and you don't know what they're talking about, you might get a little confused. But basically, this is a story about a girl who gets a few extra pieces or things to do, and the other girls in her group become pretty upset about it and jealous about it, and they want to kick her out of their their friend group, and so she decides to come up with a new group of friends. And it's just, I think it's a good description of middle school girls and really how mean they can be to each other. And so the main characters in this book are middle schoolers, rich middle schoolers at a private school. So they might have a different life than what we normally would be able to identify with, but I think some of the actual interactions between the girls are things that we can identify with. So the first two books had characters that were high school age, and then this book has middle school characters. Okay, next book is The Battle of Jericho, and this is a story for both boys and girls, although the main character is a boy. This is another one of my favorites. So Speak was one of my favorites. This is another one. And this is written about a boy who is not necessarily super athletic. He's into playing his trumpet, but he wants to be like his friends. He wants to be like the cool kids, and he decides that he wants to join this group at their high school called the Warriors of Distinction. His dad was a part of it, and it's something that has been a part of the community for a really long time, but you have to pledge, and they make you do all these kind of crazy things. We'll talk about this a little bit more in class when we take our notes on Friday, but really this idea of bullying through through pledging to something, like where you're trying to prove your worth or being made to prove your worth. In the end, someone dies. I'm not going to tell you who. You have to read the book, but in the end, someone ends up dying due to the harassment, the hazing going too far. They make the pledges do something that ends up getting one of them killed. And really it's a test for Jericho to try and figure out if this is really worth it to him, because he's drastically changing from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. He's changing into a person just to fit into this group or club. This is one of my favorites. This is a little bit longer of a story, just so that you know, those of you that are really wanting to read two books, but maybe you're a slower reader, this book will take a large majority of time because it is one of the longer books. Okay, Staying Fat for Sarah Burns by Chris Kretcher. Is about these two best friends, and this is another really well-written book. Sarah, one of the main characters in the story, is just so smart and quick in her comebacks and comments. I really enjoy her character. Well, Sarah and Eric have been friends forever. Sarah has burns on her face, and Eric is overweight. And Eric ends up joining the swim team, and because he's swimming so much, he starts to slim down. He becomes more popular. The two of them previously were friends, and they were really outcasts at their school, but as Eric slims down, he becomes much more popular. And so you start to see this break within their really powerful friendship. And then something happens to Sarah that forces her to check herself into a mental hospital. She stops speaking, and it's really a test for their friendship as Eric tries to help Sarah heal herself and talk about what happened to her. She's got some pretty dark secrets that she's hiding. This is an excellent, excellent book. Another one of my favorites. Okay, The Freaky Green Eyes is a story about a girl named Frankie that kind of creates almost like a split personality to try and deal with some things that are happening in her life. Her mom vanishes. She wants to believe that the mom is just kind of left, but she kind of knows. There's a secret part of her that knows that something is really wrong in her life and in her family. And that Freaky Green Eyes is that second character is almost a little bit more aware of what's going on and is really forcing Frankie to deal with what's happening in her life. So this one's a little bit more complicated in that you've got one person speaking from two different perspectives. It's a little bit longer too, and I think that's what makes this book a little bit more challenging. But it's a really deep book, and it focuses more on bullying from an at-home perspective instead of a school perspective. So does Sarah Burns, actually. So Staying Fat for Sarah Burns focuses on bullying at school and bullying at home. This one focuses more of bullying at home and what it can do to a family. So just some thoughts on that. Okay, Shattering Glass, we do have copies of this in the library, but I will say that from my perspective, this has more mature content, so be aware or prepared for that. The characters are high school age characters, and there is some bad language in this book and a pretty intense scene at the end. So if you think that watching or reading a book of more mature content maybe wouldn't be good for you, then let's not pick this book. But aside from that, this is about a character named Simon Glass who is picked by another character named Rob to show how what Rob's planning to do is to make Simon the most popular kid in school by the end of the year. And Rob is new to school too, but he's trying to show like how awesome he is by transforming or changing someone. Now Simon is smart. He knows what Rob is up to and kind of uses it in his own way to turn the tables on Rob, I guess. There are a mass of characters in this book, and it's actually fairly short. The characters are pretty shallow, meaning that you don't get a real depth to them. So the book reads really, really fast. It's a short read, and it leads up to an explosive ending. Someone ends up dying. But the characters aren't super deep. There's not a lot to them because there's so many of them. So something to be thinking about. But this is for sure, if you're planning on reading more than one book, this would be one that I would recommend for a dual book happening, because it reads so quick and so fast, and the ending is just like, whoa, what happened? So this is another really, most students that read this book, they really like it. But again, it has mature content, so be thinking of that. Whale Talk's another book by Chris Crutcher, and it's about a kid who wants to become more popular, and he's decided that one of the ways to do that is to get a Letterman's jacket or to become a varsity athlete. And so he decides he's going to create a swim team, but the problem is there's no swimmers at his school, they don't have a pool to practice in, and he kind of recruits students that have never swam before, or just aren't very good at swimming, so they've got really an uphill battle to to fight all the way around, like across the board. There is quite a bit of there's a little bit of violence happening in this, as far as how other people within the school deal with the fact that they're trying to create this team with misfits, basically. And it's a good book. It's a little slow, I think, at the beginning, but I think once you get into it, you'll really enjoy it. And a different perspective, I think, about athletes in general. So, good book. Okay. This is another one that I would say has a little bit of mature content, and this book's called The Earth, My Butt, and Other Big Round Things. I read this a couple of summers ago, and I just absolutely adore the main character, Virginia. I think she is fabulously written, and she comes from a family that on the outside looks really perfect. Her mom is fairly famous, the dad is working all the time, the sister is off in the Peace Corps, the brother has just started college, and she feels like she doesn't fit in her family at all, and she's bullied at home as well as at school, and she has to figure out who she is as a person and be okay with that, and by the end she does. I think this is a really, really fabulous book, and I really would recommend it, but it does have a little bit of mature content, so be thinking of that when you're deciding whether to pick it. I would say with Speak, Battle of Jericho, this is another close runner-up in one of my favorite books. I absolutely adore this main character. Okay, The Misfits. This is also a fairly easy and quick read, written from the perspective of middle school students that are all, it's interesting that we're starting now, because starting the bullying unit now with the presidential campaigns and ASB elections that are happening, because that's kind of what this story is all about. He wants to become the president, the class president, and he is not a very popular kid, the main character, and the group of friends that help him on his campaign are just great. The back and forth commentary between the group of friends is just really fabulously written, and this will make you laugh out loud if you choose to read it. But again, there are some pieces in here that might be, maybe something your parents might not want you to read, or that you might not want to read. So be paying attention to, the content of the book when you're deciding on what sounds the best. But this one has just some great witty comments. One of the main characters, the girl in the story, is really well written. She's really smart, and she says a lot of things back and forth that are great. But the main character is actually a boy. It's narrated by a boy, so it might appeal to some of the boys in the class. That's up to you. All right. I love this book, Inventing Elliot. So this is a story about this kid who has been bullied all of his life, but he's about to start a new school. It's a private school that has a uniform, and he decides he's going to reinvent himself. He goes and gets a new haircut. He practices a whole new attitude, and it totally works. He shows up at this new school, and everything changes. He's not bullied anymore, and in fact, he becomes really popular, and they ask him to be the leader of this group that runs the school and decides who gets bullied. So it's like a complete 180. It's like first, before he goes to the school, he's bullied, and now he's asked to join this group and to bully others. So he has a very personal conflict to decide about whether he joins this group or not, because as someone that was previously bullied, he should know the ramifications and the issues that happen with that. And we have to decide what, as the reader, it ends a little funny, because as the reader, we have to decide the final decision that he makes at the end of the book. Okay. And I think this is one of the last ones that I'm offering. So Tangerine is another middle school story, middle school student. The main character, Paul, has an accident when he's little that causes him to go blind, legally blind. He wears really thick glasses, and his brother is really popular and like a football star, and he has this friend that's just horrible, and he really picks on Paul, and nobody really listens to Paul. And then finally they move to this Florida town that has kind of like weird things that are happening in it, and Paul wants to become a goalie on his soccer team, but again, he can't see very well, but he's hoping that this will help him be able to start a new life and to have a different life where he's not necessarily living in his older brother's shadow, and he's not terrified of his older brother and his friend so much anymore. So it's a really interesting book. It starts out really slow. That's what students have said in the past. But once you get to about the middle of the book, it starts picking up and becoming really, really interesting. You just have to stick with it for that beginning part. But this could be for you if you like the idea of a kid wanting to be on a soccer team. Oh, and I am offering Hoots a little bit longer, and I do know some people have read it in their fifth grade class or something, but it's an option too. These kids have decided that they're going to try and save these owls that are endangered from losing their own little habitat, because they're planning on building a shopping mall over the top of it. And the kids that are fighting against it, they are being bullied by other kids in the neighborhood, and they're a little bit nerdy, but they fight back. They have a greater purpose in trying to save these owls, and that's kind of why I've picked this book. But again, if you've read this book already, pick something else. I want you to branch out and try something new. But it is a good book regardless. It's a little bit longer of a book too, just if you're keeping track. All right, we're finally finished. That was a little bit of a longer video, but I had to go through all of the novels. Hopefully you read through the summaries and you've wrote down in your notes the books that you think sound the best to you. I've definitely given you my opinion on some of my favorites. We will vote in class either on Thursday or Friday for what books you would like to read. You'll find out what book you're reading on Monday of next week, and we'll begin our last unit. So I will see you tomorrow, and hopefully you've watched the whole video and decided what books sound good to you. Thanks, guys.